this is kind of a fun way to try it. So everybody's ready? Okay, 3, 2, 1. Today, our guest is Jeff Kaufman from Silversport Transmissions. Jeff has been on the show in the past. I run their Stage 1 A41 kit in my General Lee, which is a complete bolt-in 4-speed automatic conversion, in my case, for a 66 to 70 V-body Mopar. They offer pretty much every muscle car or transmission conversion you can think of. But today, for some reason, we're not talking about a project or toy for me. No. We are talking about a whole new setup for our man Corndog on his 66 Charger. And he, too, is going to get their A41 automatic, but he's going to Stage 2. So I've already been beaten. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's been a while. How have you been?
Oh, everything's great. Doing very well and staying busy. So no complaints.
Yeah, and just, you know what? We always have to do the introductory reminder. So quickly, who you are, where you're from, what you do.
Yeah, so my name is Jeff Kaufman. I'm Vice President of Sales and Marketing at Silversport Transmissions. We're a Tremec Elite distributor. So our core business is going to be the Tremec 5 and 6-speed conversion packages for muscle cars, street rods, trucks. And kind of a legacy product for us is the A41, which debuted at Kiesler Engineering back in the day around 2007. That's a product line that we inherited, I guess, so to speak, whenever we bought the assets. And we decided to keep it going, and it works very well.
It totally does. And when we started talking a few months ago for Corndog's car, we were trying to figure out what to do, and then coronavirus hit. So
right.
How's the coronavirus treating you?
Well, we a few of us worked from home for about 3 weeks. So basically sales and tech. Sales and tech is in a smaller office up front, so we kind of isolated sales and tech from everybody. So we worked from home for about 3 weeks. I got to work in my garage. I set up my office in the garage, which may have been a mistake. There was a lot of distractions. As I sat there and looked at my project truck. But it worked well. We've been super busy, which in the middle of a pandemic, who would have thought we would have been, super busy, but we have been. But we're all back to work and kind of back to business as usual.
Yeah, exactly. So when we first started talking about doing this project, you had reached out and you said, "Hey, I would like to do something." And somehow we came back to the A41. And I know Tremec is your bread and butter, but Corndog, you may as well describe your car and the application and how we landed here.
Yeah, it's a 66 Charger. It's kind of an old school style build. It's typical small block Mopar 360. It's hyped up a little bit. It's X head off of a 340, high rise single plane intake, 750 double pumper, but it has the old 904 transmission, automatic 3-speed, and so it has 373 gears, and on the interstate it doesn't like going down the interstate. It does, but it's wrapped up pretty high, so it's not as enjoyable to drive.
And how did we end up at automatic versus a manual for you? I'm trying to remember that because it's automatic now with the beautiful full length,
right,
front to back console.
6 foot long console that runs from the very front of the dash all the way to in between the rear seats. And I wasn't opposed to going to a manual, but I knew, I'd have to find a different console. I'd have to put the transmission hump in it. And I'm not really opposed to that, but then I kind of started thinking about which would be more practical for me. Shifting through the gears is a lot of fun, but I'm thinking about like down at cruising the coast, sitting in traffic, constantly pushing the clutch pedal, or, if my wife wanted to drive it, she's not much on driving a manual. So, I kind of thought more, what would be more practical, and there again, much better than what I've got. So that's kind of why we went with the automatic.
Yeah. And I love mine, and it's totally seamless. And like you, Jeff, I've never put an automatic in a car until I got yours. I take those out, right?
A lot of guys do.
But For me, I wanted a look appropriate to the generally as it looked like on TV. And it was almost, Corndog would know better than I did, but 99.9 times out of 100, it was an automatic.
Mhm.
But I wanted that factory look, and I wanted that factory console. And, I told you from the beginning, I'm going to put fuel injection in it, and I can have trans control, but I don't have it now. And you said, I don't care. I have a standalone controller. You can use that. If you get fuel injection with trans control, you can use that. How you control it is up to you. But what was appealing to me is that other than laying back a couple portions of the firewall floor lip, just a little bit there, and one little ding in the transmission up, that was it. We didn't cut anything. Drilled a hole for the cable, but that was literally it. There was nothing to cut.
Yeah.
And when you look in there, it looks factory. You would not know it, and you probably wouldn't even know it until you started to drive it, and you just kind of got shocked that it kept shifting, right? But I mean, that's about it. So I have a stage 1, and when we started talking about Corndog's car, it's way more built. It's a hotter car, just all around. So you have multiple stages of the A41, and I kind of forget the difference. So can you delineate that a little bit?
Yeah. So basically, when you go to a stage 2, you get more robust clutch and band pack, stronger servo. We get the external cooler, and then a deeper pan. So there's not a great deal of difference between that and the stage 1. Stage 3, the main difference when you go to stage 3, you get a 5-pinion planetary, and you get billet input and output shafts. So that's where you get your extra torque capacity in the stage 3. So, it's all basically in the servo, clutch packs, the bands, and the planetary. So not a great deal of difference between them all, really.
So how do you know what you need? Like you gauge power torque on your engine?
Yeah, it's power output, torque output of the engine. So it's stage 1 is 450 torque, stage 2 is 550, and stage 3 is 650. So if a guy's if he says I'm making, 530 torque, most likely he's going to make some changes and go more power later. So we'll just go ahead and go to a stage 3.
Mm-hmm.
So it's basically when we send the initial quote out, the customer will send us the specs of his car, engine type, power output, so forth. Hopefully he'll tell us what he's going to use it for, and then we can make a determination from there of what's going to work best for him.
And what I found super nice is that, everything that you need to do it in the kit is included. So if it's in the instructions, it's included. If there's a washer referenced in the instructions, you got it. You have it. You have to find it. if you took everything apart before, it all comes super nice and packaged and labeled. And if you open it all because you think it's Christmas and put it in a big box, that's a you problem, not a me problem. But it works awesome. Now I did go ahead, and when I put the Holley fuel injection in, I ordered the system with transmission control, because the transmission itself is a GM transmission with all of your mods to it. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah. So the transmission is 4L60E based. Stage 3 would be 4L65 based. The reason we use that is, as you've kind of touched on, nobody wants to cut up their car, and a lot of guys, why don't you use a 518 or an AG1 or something like that? It's just a much bigger case. So you get into tonal modifications, torsion bar cross member modifications, and so forth. So, the GM 4L60 design, there's been over 16 million of them worldwide in all kinds of vehicles. Mm-hmm. So they're plentiful, they're easily serviced, easy to repair, and they're reliable. So, and they're small. They fit in the tunnel without any cutting.
Well, you do change stuff. It has a totally different tail shaft, it looks like. Or is there anything else that you modify it on the transmission?
Right. So by default, the 4L60 is an electronic speedometer transmission only. So we do modify the extension housing to put in a speedometer cable port, and we put a drive gear on the output shaft. So the drive gear can spin a cable. That way guys can keep their factory mechanical speedometer. So it keeps follows the factory appearance when you look in the window. Mm-hmm. And then of course the adaptation, how do you put a GM transmission up to a Mopar engine? Well, we use the later style 4L60E case, which has a detachable bell housing like a manual transmission. So we cast small block and big block bells. Of course, the small block bell also works, the Gen 3 Hemi. So small block, big block, Gen 3 Hemi, we can cover with a bell housing change. Of course, we have a converter range, torque converter range, and also the appropriate flex plates to go with all the engines.
It's pretty tight, and it comes. You get a drive shaft later. When you get that in, you got to figure out what your rear end is, of course. But once it's in, and it's very well set up. I probably spent more time adjusting the shifter cable than anything else that you would typically adjust. Specific to your car. Everything else was just bolting it in and making it go. So in Corndog's case, and he can describe it, he's got fuel injection coming at a later point too, and he's curious how to run his controller. So I'll turn that over to him.
Basically the throttle position sensor, because I know I will no longer use the kickdown linkage, which has always been. I wish you could see the kickdown that's on this car, because it looks like it was cobbled together with all thread and, steel tubing. And I mean, it's hideous. And so I've always wanted to get away from that as well. So I know, I'll get away from the kickdown, but now I use a throttle position. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, this uses a throttle position sensor. So your throttle position sensor tells the controller what the gas pedal's doing. So basically you have a 0 to 5 volts input. 0 would be no throttle, 5 volts be WOT, wide open throttle. And then also uses a vehicle speed sensor. So it kind of knows how fast you're going. So those two things with vehicle speed and throttle position, that's what it uses to function.
Yeah, so you step off into it, and then it knows to kick down into gear.
Right.
Okay.
Same purpose as a throttle valve cable or kickdown cable. It's just electronic.
Oh, okay. And also too, you mentioned the removable bell housing. So if say for example on this, I have a small block Chrysler. If for some reason I were to eventually change it over to a big block, would it be just a matter of, I know maybe torque converter may be changing, but also the bell housing, and it's pretty much a straightforward swap?
Yeah. So all we'd have to do is change the bell housing. So as long as you stayed with, you've got a 360 now, is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. So a 360 is externally balanced, but if you went to a 440, 383, 440, depending on the 440, the early ones were internally balanced, unless it was a 6-pack. Of course, that's different details, but as long as you stayed with the same balance, you would use the same flex plate. But if you go to an internally balanced big block, it would be a flex plate change, and then a bell housing change, and that's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's even better, because I've kind of considered maybe one day down the road going with a 451 stroker, which is a 400 with a 440 crank, but I've considered. I haven't even built the engine. I've got everything to do it, but I've considered doing a 451 in that car as well. So that would be very handy to be able to just a simple swap.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen our videos, Jeff, but his shop is just littered with Mopar. It's a Mopar junkyard.
Yeah.
Nothing's for sale, of course.
Of course.
But
my wife has picked on me. My wife's picked on me before. She says, I don't know if I need to call hoarders or American pickers.
Both. Call American pickers first, and then get the.
Yeah.
So one thing that has changed since we did my kit. So when I did my car first, I had no fuel injection. I just had a carburetor on it. And your kit has an option, and I suppose you don't really care if it's got a fuel injection or a carburetor or whatever. You provide a transmission controller, and you've changed the one that you use. What do you use now?
Now we've, was it last year? I can't remember what year it was. Within the last year, I think it was last year or the year before. Last year, maybe. We ran into HGM Electronics at SEMA, and they make a controller called CompuShift. And, we spent some time talking to those guys, and we're pretty impressed with what they had to say about the controller and how it functions. Really, for me, the cool thing about it was you can integrate your smartphone into it. So all of your app you'll use your app to tune the transmission, your shift points, your shift firmness, torque converter lockup, diagnostic data. It's all right there in the app. So you don't have to have a separate handheld controller. to make the adjustments to the transmission. And the cool thing is, if you have any need for outside tech support for some reason, they can actually remote in to your transmission and look
Oh,
at
really?
functional aspects, diagnostic data, and so forth. So yeah, so it
That's
does have
cool.
some really cool features to it. It's all done through your phone.
So that kit, it comes with a little box you mount on the firewall somewhere, all the cables, and then is that it? Like you just make sure it's got power and ground and connect one end to the
Yeah, so you got your
transmission, the other to the box.
Yeah, VSS, TPS, power, ground, things like that. So it's not connecting everything is not difficult. It does come with detailed instructions. We've got tech support. So if you can pull a 904 or 727 out, you can install this yourself. Most of our, all of our sales, a majority of all of our sales in general, are guys installing this stuff at home. So it is, will be done in the home garage.
I think that's pretty awesome. Now, Corndog had maybe some wiring questions, not about what wires, but where he wants them to go because he's OCD.
Yeah. Yeah, I just want everything routed neat and everything. And I've looked at the CompuShift part on your website, and of course you see the bundle of wires, but I'm sure most all of that pretty much hides in the tunnel RAM, or in the tunnel itself, the transmission tunnel. And I guess the main computer, I guess, either goes on your firewall or can it go to the interior side, or?
Sure. It's personal preference. If you want it on the firewall, you can certainly put it in the firewall, somewhere in the interior. It's really up to you. Sure can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a stickler for having just that plastic wire loom everywhere and everything.
Right.
So I like to make it look kind of neat and clean and tidy. And so that's what Rob and I have talked about in the past is, I want to try to hide everything and make it just look neat,
Yeah.
And one of the nice features I really liked, so when I did my conversion, I was doing a floor shift conversion as well. So I had to go acquire all the right parts, and I found like a factory automatic shifter, and your kit includes the detent change. And you really just pop the 3-speed detent out and put the 4-speed detent in, and it includes the screw, as I recall, right?
Right. Yeah, so whether you've got a column shift, floor shift, or slapstick, we can supply the appropriate shifter conversion package for any of those three. So all you have to have is the factory shifter mechanism. If somebody doesn't have a mechanism, they could go with an aftermarket, some kind of aftermarket shifter, cable operated shifter if they wanted to. But a lot of guys will source, an original equipment shifter mechanism just to keep everything original.
It's super cool. I mean, the one, I don't know what a 66 looks like, but on a 68, 69, there's the, next to the shifter is like park, reverse, neutral. Your kit even comes with the sticker, so that you have a little thing that says overdrive, so you can feel extra cool.
Right.
Because why would you don't want to feel it. You want to look and know that you have it.
Right. Well, it's even cooler. The slapstick shifters come with a new plastic window.
Really?
So it's even nicer. So it's instead of being a decal, it's going to be a whole new slapstick, the clear window that goes in there.
So, the little lens that goes in. Yeah.
The lens. Right.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That is awesome.
I remember my car used to have a 727. Long story short, I had this car once before, and then I sold it, and then everything was done to it afterwards. But it had a 727 with a reverse manual valve body, and I remember the indicator was also reversed as well. And I don't know where it came from, but I thought that was pretty cool that it was reverse pattern.
Yeah.
What if somebody does want a manual though? How much cutting does it take to get a 5 or a 6-speed in? Again, a B-body Mopar.
B-body is some. All right. So we modify the transmission case. Speaking of 5-speed specifically, so if you go to a 5-speed, we modify the 5-speed case, so the torsion bar cross member will tuck into a notch that's cut into the back of the transmission case itself, into the extension housing. So you don't have to cut the torsion bar cross member. There is some cutting in the center, obviously, to make a hole for the shifter to come up through the transmission tunnel. and there'd be a little bit of extra cut just for some transmission clearance in that region. On a factory 4-speed car, it's oddly enough, it's actually smaller. The shifter hump is not used because on a console car, the 4-speed handle came up through the hump, curved over to the right, and came up on center inside the transmission console. So on the 5-speed, the shifter is always on center. I can't get it over to the left through the hump. So if you have a console, it works perfect in a console. Nobody would ever notice the difference. On a non-console, the shifter is going to be on center in the tunnel rather than be through the 4-speed shifter hump. 6-speed is a different animal. It's a bigger case. It's larger, so you do have torsion bar cross member modifications. Tunnel split. You're going to split the tunnel, spread it, put in a filler strip. We supply end caps. So when you cut the torsion bar cross member, it's an open channel. So you have to drill new inner cross member holes, and we supply an end cap that gets welded in that has a little sleeve that goes inside the torsion bar cross member, so you can tighten the cross member bolts and not crush that channel. So it's an engineered package too.
And I'm sure that, you know, Camaros and things like that are probably far more places, or Chevelles, where you sell more kits. But in this particular case, between automatic 5 and 6-speed, what's your best seller for a V-body Mopar?
Just as a whole in general, between all makes, the 5-speed TKO is the best seller.
For across the board? Just for
across the board.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that pretty consistent for all the cars, that the 5-speed is a little tighter package and maybe a little less cutting?
It is. Yeah. So the 5-speed is less intrusive. You know, it's smaller package, less modifications. It's cheaper. A lot of guys, if we had an 8-speed, guys would want an 8-speed or a 10-speed, right? Just because it has more gears. So
Yeah.
A lot of people want a 6-speed just because it's a 6-speed. So, and a lot of guys want a 6-speed because they think they're going to get more overdrive. And that used to be the case, but not anymore. About a year, 18 months ago, the 50% overdrive in the 6-speed was discontinued. So you've got a 37% overdrive in the 6-speed, whereas on the 5-speed, you have a 36% overdrive. So, you know, top gear cruising, they're identical within 1%. The real advantage of the 6-speed is you have the 5th gear overdrive, which is smaller, so you have a step. You know, if you're on a 2-lane road, you want a little bit of overdrive, you've got that. Get on the highway, then you've got the big highway gear. So
I've run both in my Chevelle. Liked them both. When the last build, though, it was all T56 6-speed, because everybody does T56 6-speed.
Right.
There was really no other reason. And the easiest thing for me was I could completely copy somebody else's gear recipe, like a 9-inch with a 389 rear gear and this size tire. It's going to give me, and it worked. I just copied the blueprint, and it totally did what I want to do. I use 6-speed on the interstate and sometimes on the highway. Otherwise it's 5-speed. And often, just because I like the engine, I'll leave it in force driving around town, like, because it sounds cool.
Right.
So we have our projects, of course, and I've heard that you have your project. In fact, Jeff, I went on your Facebook page, and I'm going to play something for you. Hopefully you can hear this.
It's the end of the workday. How about we make some noise? That ought to work.
I edited that for length, but that was you with your S10 with a brand new LS swap. I assume a Silversport transmission inside of it in your home garage, which must not be OSHA compliant because you were barefoot in the video.
I'm not a fan of shoes, so.
It's a cool project. What it's a S10. I don't know my S10s very. It must be a one of the newer S10s, maybe, of that body style. That's
it's older. It's a 92.
Yeah.
So it's a square body S10. We bought it 18 months ago, 17 months, I don't know. About 18 months ago, we bought it. I had this idea that I wanted to, get an S10 and do an LS swap and a 6-speed and things like that. And so I bought the truck. It was a good running truck, $700, it's dirt cheap. And so in Tennessee, luckily we have good old vehicles. So there's no rust, it's not rusty. So I bought the truck, drove it for a couple of months, and I located an engine through my friend Chris Light at Lightning Rod Speed Shop. And I bought the engine. This was a mystery motor. So we had no idea how many miles were on it, nothing. It came with a harness, a computer, and things like that.
Is it a 5.3 or a 6?
It's a 5.3.
5.3?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's 5.3. So I was going to run that, just do a little cheap, like everybody thinks, I'm going to do a little cheap build. Well, then things got more involved. And, so I ended up getting a complete fuel system, a Phytech fuel system, using some Holley components, mufflers, cross member, steering shaft, Ohio Speed Shops. We got the oil pan through those guys, cooling system, Champion cooling systems. So the project kind of grew like a lot of our projects do. I got the Butler Performance on the valve train stuff. So I tore the engine apart. I had no intention of building an engine. I'd never built an engine before. And so tore the engine apart, had the block cleaned, honed, and all this stuff, bought new pistons, and I built the engine.
Good for you.
I became a certified YouTube mechanic.
Yeah,
So,
PhD.
Lots of reading and watching videos. So I put the engine together. We have a Tremec 6-speed in it. Did a Ford 8.8 rear. So it turned out to be a really fun little truck. And what was really, looking back, what's awesome about it is I look at it and I think I did that. I'm very mechanically inclined, and I've always been around cars and done stuff like that. But as far as assembling an engine, I tell you, the biggest thing I learned on this was wiring.
Yes. With
Connectors.
Any LS is so NOx sensors and map sensor. Now, with the Phytech system, does it have the map built into it? Maybe.
Yes.
Okay, must totally be
does.
internal. Yeah. The all the Holley systems they don't use the mass airflow sensor at all, which is a good thing. It's really streamlines it. But as far as just swap parts like oil pan, engine mounts, it would. I don't know anything about that for S10. Where did you get that stuff?
Well, that's where you have to read. So there's really no book. I maintain, if anybody wants a recipe of parts, I've maintained a very detailed list of parts. So I did a lot of reading, a lot of research, and it took 15 months. I worked on this thing for 15 months before I fired it. And, a lot of that time was, ordering parts, waiting on parts, a lot of reading and things like that. We have the engine mounts. They're out there. Metaltech Manufacturing makes the engine mounts. They work perfect. I used a GM muscle car oil pan, worked perfect. The Holley steering shaft. Ohio Speed Shops is where I got the oil pan. Cross member. We don't make a cross member to put a 6-speed in an S10. So I got one from Holley. It worked perfect. You have to drill one hole in the passenger side of the frame rail for a bolt. I didn't have to modify a thing. It was perfect. So the stuff is out there. You have to kind of dig. A lot of reading, some digging, but the stuff is there. Even for the round body, the next generation after that, there's a lot of information out there for that stuff. But man, it was easy. Looking back, it was easy. Now that I know what I did, but
easier the second time, I'm sure.
Easier the second time. So yeah, but it was a lot of fun.
How well does the LS actually fit in there? Because I know that the like a small block Chevy, if you try to drop one in, it really crowds the radiator. Did you have any issues with front or rear clearance?
No, I don't have any issues front rear. So in the front, I actually, for now, I'm using a 4.3 V6 radiator, and I've mounted a couple of shallow cooling fans on the inside. I mean, it's close.
Yeah,
it's close, but it works. It is tight. It is tight for sure.
I know what I believe the stat used to be if you had an LS block and a small block Chevy block, a Gen 1 side by side, the LS is exactly 1 inch shorter.
Really? Huh.
I know it buys you. It's supposed to buy you 1 inch at least.
Yeah.
And that's assuming that you could put the motor mounts wherever and blah blah blah. But yeah, that's cool. What rear gear did you use? What size? You said an 8.8 Ford.
It's a 373.
373, and then you chose Where'd you get your transmission? Just curious.
Our warehouse.
Wow. Yeah.
It's called research and development.
Yes, I'm sure.
Our warehouse.
Well, good for you. And, you know, we appreciate the chance to get to do another project together. This is going to be really cool. We'll be documenting this in the shows as we go. And this is you know, for Corndog, this is huge. I mean, and his knowledge about the world stops at about 1988.
Yeah.
And automatics have 3 gears, and if you want a 4-speed, that's a manual. So we're mind blowing here. This is going to be great for him.
I've been wanting to put this thing back on the road for such a long time. I mean, I parked it for a while because it was just it was too much trouble to drive. You know, it was a pain to drive on the interstate. It didn't like sitting in traffic, and so I've been wanting to. I've mentioned it before on like Instagram and stuff. Bring it into the 21st century, and so
Right.
so the overdrive transmission's a big plus as far as doing that. So I'm looking forward to it.
You are going to love it. And, you know, however you control the transmission, I'm pretty excited to see the CompuShift. That is the name, right? CompuShift?
Yeah, CompuShift. Mm-hmm.
I watched one of their YouTube videos, and it's I think the one I watched, the guys are from Australia, so they have these awesome accents, and they're talking about using it in a truck or something. But
yeah, I remember that video. Yeah,
the integration is pretty nice. Like mine, I do have Holly for mine, so for my transmission control, it's there. But I am doing a little guesswork as I go. Like everything works perfectly, but playing with line pressures and things like that, I'm not there yet.
And I'm doing the same thing with my Phytech system. You know, there's so many different adjustments.
Yeah.
You know, IAC steps and things like that. So I've got a ways to go, and I'm not an expert on that stuff on fuel injection at all. So it's a learning curve for me on this stuff. So
cool, man. Well, thank you again. Thanks for taking the time today. Corndog, you have any more questions about your new kit?
No, not really. I'm just anxious to get started on it. I think it's going to be fun.
It's going to be super fun.
I'm not going to do like Rob either, where I get it up on a 2-post lift and walk up on it. I've got to do it the old fashioned way, put it up on jack stands.
What are you talking about? That worked awesome.
Yeah, I bet.
There's a whole story to that. The transmission was the safest thing we did.
Yeah, I saw some of those pictures. Those were pretty sketchy pictures.
Doing the K member swap, that was probably not smart. But the transmission was very safe, Jeff. You would have been. All right, I will catch you guys later. Really appreciate the time.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Recorder's off. Okay, we win.
All right.